Hey, it's Dean Brown, designer, Spruance Leader. I just want to talk about the new version 2 rulebook a little bit. I currently have the version 1.5 out. Got a lot of great feedback from people online. So that's basically an update of the rulebook that came with the game. So there are some clarifications in here, a couple of minor rule updates. But basically, it just clarifies a lot of questions that were raised in the original rule book. You can see that this version, follows the standard DVG format, where Section 1's has a lot of information. So this is basically a reference section, so you can come back and find information about everything you want to know about the campaign sheets and the tactical display, and the ship cards and commander cards, and so forth. So this section 1, has a lot of information in it, a lot of information you need to know to play the game. So all the different counters, all of that. So this was designed basically to be a reference section. Here's all the task force actions, the commander actions, helicopter actions, commander skills. So all this is laid out in in section 1, and then when you start to play the game, the following sections are a little bit shorter because it's assuming that you went back and you're going to go back and read information here in section 1 that has important information. So got a lot of feedback on this version style of the rule book, basically meaning it was hard to learn the game because you have to keep flipping back and forth, move enemy units. So that means there's a placement modifier. So then I go back and find the enemy unit cards and say, oh yeah, there's a placement modifier. What does that mean? So what I did was I generated a reformatted rulebook. So this is version 2. So you can see here's the table of contents. So, section 2, game start, here starts on page 5, or here it starts on page 23. So what I did was I took a lot of this reference material that was up in the front. Again, good reference. If you have questions, you can always come back here. But I moved it further back into the relevant sections of the rulebook. So let's just quickly go through that. So game overview. Pretty much the rules are the same. It does, I do have all of the 1.5 version rule updates in here, but like I said, I reorganized it. So introduction, game flow. So this is like a high-level graphic to kind of give you an idea of, how the game is going to go. You start the campaign, choose your forces, then you go on your missions. You select your target, what forces you're taking with you, what ordnance you're taking, and then you move your task force towards a target and resolve enemy air attacks or enemy encounters, target encounters through this tactical display. Tactical encounters here on the tactical display. Once the mission's complete, you do your debrief, and then after all the targets have been, and missions have been performed per the campaign, then you evaluate to see how well you did. So just an overall game flow graphic. Could look better. I'm not really a great graphic artist. And then the game components. So, again, section 1 in the old rulebook had very detailed explanations. So this is just a summary of, here's all the components: general, U.S. Allied components, and the enemy components. So no detailed description. I did put in the tactical display detail diagram here just because, this is the heart of where you're executing your missions. And then game terminology section. So now we get into campaign start. So it was, I mentioned I reformatted the rule book, so the rules now are on the outer edges. So these are the rules, and then in the middle sections here, various things, explanation sections that describe the various components. There's definitions of some of the key terminology, like special option points. What are they? What are they used for? And then we have examples, later on. So section 2 here campaign setup, everything you need to know in order to set up the campaign. Ship characteristics are listed here. Because here's where you're purchasing your ships, so you're deciding, you know, what ships do I want. Here's the characteristics that might be relevant to that. Now you want to, you know, purchase helicopters, a brief explanation of helicopters, selecting your commanders, and also selecting commander skills. So here's a description of the commander skills, short description of the skill levels and what changes as your ships and commanders, you know, move up from, you know, average to or green to average. You know, what parameters can change. And then here's an example of a player log filled out based on, you know, the campaign that was selected. Again, rules, explanation in the middle. Then this is an extended example of a campaign start. Again, I do have some embedded definitions here just to help explain what's going on in the example. So this is new. You know, this isn't in the original rulebook, so you can see, you know, for the campaign that was selected here, you know, these are the ships that I selected and the skill levels for each of the ships, the commander skills, helicopter, 2 commanders that I selected, and brief explanation of, you know, why those were selected. And then we get in the sequence of play. So again, this is page 11 here. This is on page 26 in the old rulebook. So again, took the material, moved it back. So a little bit more information here in the sequence of play. So, you know, this one just had basically the list and the references to the paragraphs. So there's a short description, you know, associated here, and then a graph showing, you know, how you navigate through the major sections of the rulebook. Then we get into the mission setup phase. So, you know, all the target types. This was in, I think, section 1 of the old rulebook. Pull that back. You know, again, the steps are pretty much the same as in the version 5 1.5 rulebook. Just added some additional explanatory text here and some examples, like, for example, improvement. You know, what that means when you're selecting a target. And then, you know, task force setup. So again, here's a description of screening force, main force, protected force. What are they? What do they do? What are the characteristics of each one? So that's been pulled back into this section. Now you're purchasing ordnance. Here's the ordnance information that you need to know what ordnance you need to buy. And then an example is a mission setup. So this is showing, you know, I have picked a target. These are the ships and helicopters that I'm taking, and the commander, and then now I filled out the log sheet, you know, to fill that out. So I think this is kind of new. There was pieces of this in the old rule book, and then now we're, you know, placing the enemy task forces per the task force track. A little bit more explanation here. And then we get into mission execution. So again, there's basically five steps that you cycle through until you get to the target and complete that. So again, pretty much the same, but there's a couple of graphics here that are new. And then how you set up the task force engagement. So a random encounter, you know, how that engagement gets set up versus a target encounter. So they are slightly different. So this is just basically showing the process for that. And then you start talking about enemy subs, your unknown enemy subs, you know, neutral subs. So all of that, again, as I mentioned, has been pulled back. Placing your forces. So here you can see a brief explanation of the enemy ship and enemy sub cards. So you have the graphic with all the identifiers on it, but the explanation is a little bit shorter here because in each of the following steps, like placement, you know, it talks a little bit more in depth about how you place the ships on the tactical display. And then engagement phase. So again, now here's the definitions. What does noise management mean? Torpedo defense, missile defense. You know, how do you keep track of your commander actions? And now here's where the task force ship actions are. So each action type with a description of each. Again, pretty much the same, just reformatted from the original 1.5 rulebook. all the actions that the task force ships can perform, and then the helicopter actions, and then the commander actions, along with the specialized commander actions, and then how you move the ships, some graphics there, and then the actual sequence for once you get to have the tactical encounter set up. Here's the steps that you would go through. So I took the flow chart that's on the reference sheet, which you still have, and put that in here. Then some detection examples, command and control check, attack examples. A lot of this was in the rulebook already. I just kind of pulled it out into separate sections. Enemy carrier. Oh, so this is a new enemy carrier attack. So there was some questions about, when you have an enemy carrier on the tactical display, how to, where do the aircraft take off? How do you resolve that? So there's an example here and a short description added. And then evaluating the encounter. So this basically is a summary chart showing XPs and stress for ships, commanders, and helicopters, how they would be applied as you're going through the engagement or as you complete the engagement. And then an example of the tactical engagement. This was already in, I think, in a different section, 13 maybe, of the rulebook, so I put it here at the end of section 6. Again, one turn of a tactical encounter. Showing helicopter ASW attack. This was in the old rule book. And then a new one showing a helicopter attacking a ship. So this wasn't in there, and there were some questions, so I have an example that I put in for that. Enemy air engagement phase. So here's the information associated with the enemy aircraft counters, and then the steps that you'd fall through, and then an example showing a sample enemy air encounter. And then at the briefing, the target's been addressed or the mission is complete. Did you meet the success criteria for the target to earn the victory points? Adjusting your tracks, discarding ordnance, etc. And then once you've completed all of the missions against all the targets, then campaign evaluation. How well did you do? Short example for that. Section 10 optional rules. So these didn't change. It's the same optional rules as in 1.5. I did pull in this sensor performance card example that I think I had in a separate summary sheet. So that's now part of the rule book. Showing an example of how our subs, known whether they're deep below the thermal layer or above the thermal layer. Task training force counters, so that's pretty much the same. And then the ships, taken right out of the original 1.5 rulebook, the ordnance, a die modifier summary chart that Glenn Saunders put together to help out, so that's now part of this rulebook. And then a short index. I hopefully got most of the major terms there that you would want to try to reference and find in the rulebook. So that is the new version 2 rulebook. Hopefully it addresses some of the issues that people were having learning how to play the game. I know several reviews that came up. I enjoyed the game despite the poor rulebook. So hopefully this helps address some of those issues. It's posted on BGG, or at least I submitted it to BGG. I'm going to submit this version. I have a previous iteration of V2 on the Facebook site. I'm going to put it there, this version. And then, any feedback. Again, I don't think, I haven't had any new players, start off with this version of the rule book to see if there's anything missing or anything that can be improved. So any feedback that you can provide on the file section or on the Facebook page, that would be appreciated, so I can go ahead and update this. And then I have to talk to Dan to determine, which version of the rulebook, do we want to have in the next printing, this version or the traditional DVG. style version, so I still have to have that conversation. I do plan on updating, the carrier expansion rulebook and the SSN expansion rulebook to follow this similar format. But I haven't started that yet. But I am probably going to get started, in June. To get these rulebooks up to date. It's probably less of a problem because they're smaller, and they rely a lot on on the procedures that you're following here in the core rulebook. So we'll be updating these and reformatting them to align with the format in this rulebook. Just haven't gotten that far yet. All right. Like I said, feedback is appreciated. Thanks a lot.